Try. Kind of, sort of, but not really. All right. Okay. So you're going to round your answers to the nearest tenth. So up at the top shows you how. And the distance formula is basically going to find the distance between any 2 points on a coordinate plane. That means you could see it in a graph, but you could also get it just as ordered pair. And so we're going to work both ways, and your homework will ask you to do that. Now, we're going to label the coordinates on our triangle. I have point A here and point B here. Let's list their coordinates so that we can actually put them into the formula, all right? So, I need the x value. How many spaces is it in the x direction? 6. So I went 6 to the x direction, and then I went 2 in the y direction. So the ordered pair for point A would be 6, 2. And then what did you do when you go to the B to label B's coordinates? It's actually 2, 6. So I went 2 to the right, so 2 in the x direction, and then 2, 4, 6 in the y direction. We're going to use our formula now and plug in these values into this formula. Notice what the formula is telling you to do. Take the x coordinates and subtract them. Once you get that answer, then you square it. Then find the y coordinates and subtract them, get that answer and square that. Then you'll add the two values together. So it's pretty straightforward. Okay, so let's see if we can plug this in properly. Now, does it matter which ordered pair you call x1 and x2? It makes no difference whatsoever. What matters is that you do it the same order each time. So I'm just going to start with the top one and go to the bottom one. And since I'm going to start with the top one and go to the bottom one only to follow the formula, should you need to look back at your notes, I'm going to label the top one 2 and the bottom one 1, so it's actually following the formula, okay? But you'll get the same answer either way. Okay, so let's plug it in and see what happens. So it says I need the x2 point, take away the x1 point. So that means I have a 6 minus a 2, and I would square that. I will add that to the y values. And notice I'm starting at the top again. 2 minus a 6. And I will square that. Is everybody okay with that so far? Okay, good. Simplifying everything. 6 minus a 2 becomes a 4, so I need a 4 squared. Plus 2 minus a 6 becomes a negative 4. Notice I put it in parentheses, because if you don't, your calculator may not behave properly. So when you go to put this in your calculator, make sure you either put parentheses around it, or you just know for a fact that a negative times a negative is going to give you a positive answer. Okay? So I'm going to wind up with a 16 for the first term plus a 16 for the second term. So you get the square root of 32 as an answer, which is great, but we're going to try to put our answers in decimal form to practice rounding to the nearest tenth. If you have this calculator, once again, just second square root 32. When you hit enter, nothing is going to change for you. So it's not a decimal, is it? Oh, well, if you have the little blue calculator, you will. Okay, yours will. If you have this one, the little double arrow right above the enter button will change things back and forth and back and forth. All right. So you should get a 5.65. But remember, we're rounding to the nearest tenth. So here is the tenths column, so that's the last number I need in my answer. But the 5 is going to tell me I actually need to bump that 6 up to a 7. So the distance here is approximately 5.7 units, whatever they may have been. Now, I want to show you something. And you need to never, ever, 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 ever do it. I'm showing it to you so you won't ever do it. I don't care where you are. If it's a test, it will be the wrong answer, so don't do it. if you were to look at the distance from point A to point B, and you're like, cool, 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 is my answer. No. 4 will never be your answer on the hypotenuse. Don't you dare just count those little spaces thinking it's right. Why is it wrong? Because you're doing the diagonal of those spaces. You're not taking the actual X or Y vertical and horizontal measurements. So you could do it here, 1, 2, 3, 4, because this is legit. But here you're cutting through at the diagonal. The diagonal is a little bit longer than the spaces. Notice our answer is 5.7. If you just counted the spaces, we got a 4. Don't do it. Okay? Don't do it. All right. Yes, sir. I didn't get a 6. For A, because it's 6 spaces to the right and 2 spaces up for the location of the coordinate, the point. It's 6 spaces from the origin, and then it's 2 spaces up from the origin. Okay? It kind of gets in the way. Yeah, I get you. So, all right, and so the example has been worked for you from an ordered pair, but since we worked that first one, we kind of know what we're doing. Let's move to this true try it here. Find the distance between these 2 coordinates. Use your formula and set it up nicely, okay? So the distance is equal to -5 and a +4. And a -2 and a -6. And I want, before you go any further, I want you to look at your setup to see if it matches mine, because 20 bucks says 2 or 3 of you have this wrong right now. Yes, sir?
If the 4 was a positive, aren't you adding?
The formula at the top of the page says X value minus the other X value, right? So the 4 is positive, but this is the minus from the formula. Okay? My concern is right here on the second set, on the Y values. Do you have the double negatives? How many of you forgot to do the double negatives? Oh, don't even story to me. Yeah, thank you. Right, you can. You don't have to, but you can. If it helps you, do it. All right? So now we're going to clean this up. A -5 minus 4 more is the same as a -5 plus a -4. I get a -9, and I need to square that value. Same signs, add and keep. Right? Okay. So over here, these 2 negatives make a positive. So different sign, subtract. So I have different signs. This is negative. This is now positive. Keep the sign you had more of. So it's going to be a positive, right? So now it's going to be a +4. Then you'll be exact. Are you okay with the basic mathematics? That's where y'all are going to mess up. You can do the hard stuff. It's the easy stuff that's going to mess you up. Use your calculator if you need to. Squaring everything, you're going to get an 81 plus a 16 plug it into your calculator. And change it to a decimal. So my distance on this answer is going to be approximately 9.8. Because the 4 has no effect, does it? 4 and below, let it go. 5 and above, give it a shove. Any questions so far? Pretty easy in general? All right. Truly see if you can do the last one by yourself. I'll get you the answer here in a second. But I want you to try this one independently and on your own. How'd you do?
Almost.
Got the right idea? I'm sorry. There you go. Better? Yeah. So, like 10 problems of homework is going to be just like this. Okay?
Oh, I did it wrong too.
Okay, so find your mistakes.
I did make a mistake.
Okay, that's why I wanted to make sure you did it on your own, because you need to figure out what you're doing wrong. So fix it real quick and we'll move on to the back side. So you'll have a couple examples of good stuff on the front. Once you, yes, but it's the simple math that's going to cause you to have mistakes. It's not the formula, it's the simple part. And that's what I say, it's just the simple stuff. All right. Right. Yep, exactly. All right, let's get started on the back side, please. Did you have a question? Okay, let's go, guys. Come on back. All right. Yes, sir? It automatically will go into a decimal. Just hit second square root equals. It will automatically give you a decimal. It's right by the x squared button. Second x squared, and then put your number in and then hit equals. Okay? All right. This midpoint formula is going to find, what do you think? The middle point of that distance, right? So on the front side, we found from the top of this point down to this point, we found the distance along here. The midpoint is actually going to find the location that would be the halfway point of that distance. Okay? Now, this one turns out this triangle is the same triangle that's on the front side, so all of the coordinates are the same. All right? So it'll be pretty easy to work with. So let's see if we can do that. Notice what it's telling you to do. Now you're taking the x values and just adding them together and dividing by 2. You're kind of finding the average, aren't you? From this end up here all the way to this end here, and then I'm going to cut it in half by dividing by 2. So the formula itself should make a little bit of sense to you. So on the front side, we had our a value. I think it was down here, right? We had the a at the bottom.
Yeah.
Okay, and the coordinates were 6 and 2. So a is at 6 and 2. And then we had the b value up at the top, and it was kind of the reversed. It was at 2 and comma 6. So b is 2 and 6. So let's do what the formula is asking us to do. Take your x values and add them together. So I'm finding x this time, so I'm going to take 6 plus 2 divided by 2. So 6 plus 2 makes 8. 8 divided by 2 is a 4. So in the ordered pair location, your x value would be a 4. We're going to do the same thing now to find our y coordinate. Y plus y divided by 2. So this is the y and this is the y. So I would have a 6, let's see, a 2 plus a 6 divided by 2 once again. So it's 8 divided by 2. So the y value is a 4. And let's look to see if that turns out to be truthful. I should be able to graph this point 4, 4 and it be in the dead center of that particular line. And it is. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Sure enough, there's the point 4, 4 as the middle or midpoint of that segment. Now, and yes, sir? From the origin, all right? 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay? Okay. Have you watched the Cops TV show? Their Bad Boys theme song? Bad boys, what you gonna do? What you gonna do when they come for you, right? The theme song works really good for this formula, but I'm not going to make you memorize or sing it to me, but it's just for your own knowledge. Midpoint, midpoint, what you gonna do? Add them together, divide by 2. Midpoint, midpoint, what you gonna do? Add them together, divide by 2. Hey, hey! So anyway, one of the geometry teachers was really frustrated with her class because they couldn't seem to remember this simple formula. And I said, let me work on it. And I did. It didn't take very long. So anyhow, that's just general information for you. Now, when we get these answers, these are not the distance answers. These are the midpoint answers. We would prefer these answers to be in fraction form, okay? Maybe put a little star or something to remind you. Try to keep fractions, okay? I want fraction answers here, which is actually faster for you in general because you don't have to go back and plug anything into your calculator. Let's look at the try it. I'll work the first try it with you and then the second try it you're on your own, and then we'll move to the last section. So the first thing we did was distance. Now we're looking for the midpoint. So we add our x values together. So 5/3 plus 0. So x is equal to 5/3 plus 0 divided by 2. And the y would be 1 plus 2 divided by 2. So once you have them set up, now we're just going to do the math on them. What I don't want to see is you grab your calculator and go 5/3 divided by 2. I don't, because guys, this is so much easier. Just multiply. Bounce. 5 times 1 is 5. 3 times 2 is 6. You're done. By the time you grab your calculator and punch the numbers in, I'm going to be finished. And if you would just practice it a few times, you'd be finished too. It's very easy to multiply, quote, divide fractions. So the x value is going to be 5/6. And the y value, 1 plus 2 is going to be a 3 divided by a 2. So it's at 3/2. And you finished your problem. So here you could remind yourself, multiply. But they're very fast. Okay? See if you can do the next try it. Yeah, I think it turns out a little bit easier. There's no fractions. You should have gotten a -1 and a -21 over 2. Yes, sir.
Will it always be minus 1?
No? You mean the formula or your answer?
Oh, never mind.
Okay, the formula is always divided by 2, but your answer is whatever the result of the math is, okay? 21 over 2 you can't, but had it been 20 over 2, yes, I would have expected to see a 10 or a -10, yeah. Okay?
Remember it divided it into chunks,
Right.
messing around and stuff.
Well, you can, but because I said I'd like your answers to be fractions, you should have just left it. Okay? Yes, sir?
What would x equals 3 minus 5?
Yeah.
Why did it add to formula?
It is. 3 plus the coordinate -5 is the same as 3 minus 5 in the calculator. Okay, you get a -2. All right? Okay. Now, how you doing so far? Not bad? All right. This is probably the toughest part, but it's still not that bad, honestly. Please look at the visual here for you. I drew for you. Because this part is slightly different, and you do need to read what you're looking for when you're doing your math. Read the directions. Find the coordinates of the end point. That means I'm looking for either the E value or the G value. If P is the midpoint. So they're giving you the midpoint now. And they're giving you one of the two ends. You have to find the other end. All right? All you do is plug it into the midpoint formula, but you plug it in where it belongs. So if this is the middle, this is the midpoint, and this is one of the endpoints, I'm looking for which variable, E, P, or G? G. So I'm looking for this endpoint down here. I'm going to still use this formula because x plus x divided by 2 will equal my midpoint, my x value on the midpoint, right? I know one of the x values at the end point. It's a -8. So I'm going to put a -8 right here. I have to figure out what the other value is going to be. When I figure it out, when I calculate this, I should get the answer of -5 because that's the x, the midpoint's x value. Does that make sense? I'm just plugging in the information I have. Instead of me having to find the midpoint, they gave it to me. So I know what it should equal in the end. Yes, sir. They're telling you. That's what I said. Read the directions very carefully. They're saying P is the midpoint. So that means this is the middle of the line. Okay? This is one of the ends. I'm trying to find the location to the other end. So I'm using the midpoint formula for whatever information I have. I know the x value here is an 8. I'm trying to find the other end point. I don't know what it is, but I know when I figure out the math, the final answer, because the middle would be -5. So this is a Romeo, Juliet, Mad Dad problem now. This is easy. We're going to rip out the 2. And that leaves me a -8 plus x is equal to a -10. Add 8 to both sides. And you find out that the x value is going to be a -2. So down here, since I'm finding the G, my ordered pair, the x value is going to be a -2. Now I just have to find the y value. So you do the same thing, but now with the y coordinates. I have a y that's a 6. I don't know what the other y value is, so it stays a y. I'm going to divide it by 2. And when I get that answer, it better equal a 10. Huh?
Is it 2 not supposed to turn to a negative?
This is from the formula.
Yep.
that's what I got was a negative 2. And
Okay. Yeah, over there, the x plus 8 over 2, and you move it, so what's it to a negative?
no, no, sir. It's a positive 2. I'm multiplying. I'm not adding or subtracting. I'm multiplying. You multiply. Okay? So multiplying, we have 6 plus y is equal to 20. So what number is missing? 6 plus what makes 20? 14. So y is equal to 14, because I minus 6 from both sides, and you found out where the end point would be of this particular line. Yes, ma'am?
Because there's like 4 different.
Right, but okay. All right. I'm going to work this. We're going to work this next problem. I'm going to work it on a bigger sheet of paper, and we're going to label things. Maybe it'll make more sense to you. Okay? So this is the next problem that's on your worksheet. Okay. This is the midpoint. This is one of your end points. If I plug it into this formula, this is the midpoint formula. Okay? This one is going to deal with just the x values to find the x value of the midpoint, which we happen to know. Okay? I only have one x value on the end point because I only have one end of my line, right? So I know that the x value is a 5. So this end point plus my missing end point value that would have been an x, because to have all of the pieces, you would have had this. Here's an end point, and here's the e, the missing end point that we're supposed to find. End point, middle of the 2 points. Okay? So this is an unknown. This is what I'm trying to find. I'm looking for the x values first. So I plug in the one x that I do know, and the other x that I don't know into the formula, divide it by 2, has to equal my midpoint, which I know the x value of this midpoint is a -1. When I calculate this, I'll find the x value for my missing endpoint here. That's what I'm finding, okay? So multiplying, you get a 5 plus x is equal to a -2. Seems bright. Okay, and then what do? I'm going to subtract 5 from both sides. And so the x value is a -7, meaning the missing value for that other end that I'm trying to find is a -7. Now I have to find the y value of that other missing end point. So I'm going to do it again, but now I'm doing the y formula for the midpoint. So now I'm going to take the y value from the known endpoint, which is a 6, plus the unknown y that I'm trying to find, divided by 2, will equal the midpoint's y value. Ripping it out and multiplying, 6 plus y is equal to a 6. When you subtract 6 from both sides, you would get a 0. So even if we were to kind of put this on a number line, and I don't know if you'll be able to get this or not, all right, if the midpoint is at 1, 3, at -1, +3, let's see if this can work. I don't know if we can make it look good or not. At -1, +3, that's supposed to be the middle of my line at this point. Okay? I found one of the endpoints was given to me, over 5 up 6, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5, 6. So kind of I know this information right here. So this was the middle, and this is the G value. I have to find the E value. So supposedly somewhere down here probably is my E value. Okay? So the x I found is at -7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Oh, I should have put a dot there. Oh. Okay, thank you. All right, so the x value would be at -7 and the y value would be at 0. So if my spaces were good and I was on graph paper, do you see what we wound up doing? They gave me this, they gave me this. I was supposed to find the coordinates for this one. So I used the midpoint formula and plug in whatever information they gave me from the 2 points that I did have to find the end point, okay? So if you'll just plug in the formula, it'll be okay. There's about 7 or 8 of those problems. After you do 2 or 3 of them, you'll get it, okay? Your assignment is on a worksheet, and so let me get you that real quick.